All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Woman to Woman TV show. I'm your host, Wanda Carter. And this evening, we have a wonderful guest, Mr. Tom Shepard.
It's the Little Calumet River Underground
Okay.
Railroad Project. We are a group, we're a diverse group of individuals who are local historians, academics, folks from the communities who have been researching and learning more and teaching people about the fact that the Underground Railroad, in fact, did exist up in our area, and that there was activity before emancipation, of course, of freedom seekers coming up from south down south and in Missouri and other places where slavery was still accepted, and escaping their enslavement and coming to the Chicago area, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, in many cases, leaving Chicago because it still was not entirely safe in the state of Illinois because of uh, Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 and slave catchers that were trying to bring people back to plantations and where they left. And oftentimes collecting a bounty for bringing black folk back to their enslavement. So
Wow.
we learned that there was a safe house right in our neighborhood. I'm out in the Pullman Roseland area. On the
Okay.
very edge of the city is the Little Calumet River, and
Oh,
and at that time there was a community of it was primarily a Dutch settlement at that time in the 1850s, and it was a hotbed of abolitionists there that were assisting the freedom seekers as they came up through the area.
Mm.
One house in particular, and I'm going to do a little experiment right here. I don't know if you can see
Oh, I
this
can
if
see
I
it.
hold it up. Okay,
Yeah.
this is a photo of an old farmhouse that no longer exists, but it was on 40 acres along the Little Calumet River, right at a point where there happened to be a ferry and later a bridge across the river. And that's how folks, if they were coming to Chicago from the south, had to get across the river. And that's where this farmhouse that I showed you, owned by the Ton family, Ton, and they would assist the freedom seekers and put them up and feed them and give them rest, and then help them along on their journey by taking them as far as the Indiana border, where they could be passed off to other people who were sympathetic to them and other abolitionists in Indiana. So most of the
Wow.
folks were coming up to Chicago thinking that they would be completely safe, but oftentimes they found out that the only place that they would be safe is if they got left the land of the free and went up to Canada of all things in order to
Oh,
be free. So
yeah.
this was just a stopping point for folks that traveled then across Indiana up into Michigan and across the river at Detroit, and found their freedom in Canada. So
Yeah.
that's who we are. We formed a 501(c)(3), and we do tours and presentations. We go around and talk to school groups, social groups, historical societies, church groups, and things like that. Wherever there's an interest, folks like you that are interested in this
So your
topic.
tours, your tours, you take them by that place where the little house was at, that's no longer there.
Exactly. Right.
what
Wow.
is what
Right.
replaced that house? The Tun's house or the barn? It's gone, right?
Yes. Yes. It no longer exists. We did find the foundation of the barn and some of the other buildings that farm buildings, and this is where oftentimes they would allow people to the freedom seekers to come and maybe spend a night or more than a night until they were replenished, and then would continue on their journey. And we're talking about journeys when this isn't where like you can hail a cab or jump on a bus or the train or something like that. These folks had been walking for hundreds of miles through the woods, often at nighttime, all of the dangers that you can imagine besides slave catchers, such as snakes and bears and
Oh,
wolves. And just
Well,
think about it. It was no Holiday Inn at that time, So
wow.
uh,
That,
And
that
there
even
were
sounds scary.
the bounty hunters too, the bounty hunters. But you know, the Ton family, Ton, is that Vietnamese? Where's that surname from? Ton, the Ton family.
yeah, they were from Holland, and Jan Ton and Aagje Ton, his wife, settled in this area. Came from Holland in 1848
Oh,
and established this farm. Well, the farm actually was originally owned by the Dolton family. That's the town of Dolton named for them, and they operated this ferry that went across the Little Calumet River there and helped people to. Well, there was traveling both ways. This was a quite a well, back then there were no highways, of course, but this was a well-traveled road, especially from farmers bringing their goods up to the growing town of Chicago. At that time, Chicago was just a small little village, like not even the size of the Loop, but it was growing. And at that time, there was a small black community in Chicago as well, and there were black abolitionists in the city of Chicago that joined in. So we actually look at this as the beginning of the civil rights efforts because we had black and white folks working together,
yes.
and both in the interest of the freedom of and the dissolution of slavery, of course.
Okay. Oh, wow. This is so
Now,
interesting to hear you talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
you're not affiliated with
right.
but you do have a historical society down there. What's the name of that of your historical society? Do you have one in Pullman? It's
Well,
Pullman.
there are a number of them. The Calumet Heritage Partnership is uh, we're affiliated with them, and we also we've been endorsed by the Calumet City Historical Society, the Lansing Historical Society, the South Holland Historical Society.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All of the different groups out here have been learning from us, and of course, the Pullman community is big on history too. So we're affiliated with them, especially since we got this place on the National Park Service Registry on the Network to Freedom, they call it. And it's one of about 500 places throughout the country that had a significant role in the Underground Railroad movement.
Railroad. Yeah.
You know, I was asking that, Tom, because I'm involved in the Edgewater Historical Society, and
Sure.
I look for exhibits to do. Now, this project would be a fantastic exhibit, whether it was a traveling exhibit to the Pullman Museum. You don't have to cover the entire museum with the exhibit, but you could have a great space and take it to every historical society as an exhibit. There's a lot that goes into an exhibit, and it takes some skill and people who are talented about making an exhibit very receptive to school kids, high school, college, and so forth. Have you given it any thought about turning this into an exhibit that would travel around in that area?
Sort of, yes. It's difficult because when these freedom seekers left slavery, when they left where they were, oftentimes they left with just what they had on their back, Andrea, and it's not like we have a whole lot of relics or mementos from the era. So it's pretty difficult. You probably know Ward Miller from Preservation Chicago, I would guess.
Yeah.
Um, what we're doing at this point in time is identifying sites from all the way from Bronzeville out to the south side and the south suburban area, and even now into Indiana and Michigan. We're expanding, and I'll talk about that in a little minute. But yeah, it's what you're saying, Andrea, is one of our endeavors that we would like to achieve at some point in time. Right now, what we're doing is connecting the dots where we have found people who know of sites, certain sites and places. We have a relationship with Quinn Chapel down in Bronzeville there, and the Bronzeville Historical Society and other folks down there. So we're expanding now and making these contacts. But Andrea, what we do have are posters and things like that. That when we do go out, we will put those on display, and eventually we'll get around to maybe having some relics if we can find folks that have stuff that's passed down from their great grandma or great granddaddies
Right.
that might be up in the attic.
Tom, it happened. I believe that. And so would be a key institution that would love to take this story all the way through from Bronzeville down is the Chicago Historical Society. But they have to be, I mean, and I know you don't have all but they could be approached and they would do an exhibit that connects the dots and everything. But I don't know if anybody's approached them. But the Chicago Historical Museum is always looking for unique and different things. And this is something that they would just maybe do a huge exhibit on, not just in the little Calumet City, but I'm just from Bronzeville and that whole south area.
What about
That's a great.
the people at the Sabo Museum? You ever asked them?
Yes, we're just starting to work with DuSable Museum, and we've got some trips planned down there where we're bringing groups that are interested to the DuSable Museum. And there too, they don't have a whole lot on the Underground Railroad.
Right.
And you know, as I said before, it's very difficult to come up with different artifacts that may have been used during that time. In fact, we've had an archaeological dig on the property of the Ton Farm and come up with certain pieces of porcelain and glass, and we're hoping to find some pots and pans and stuff like that. But it's
Well, I'm just interested to know what got you guys started with this whole project. What was the motivation behind starting
right.
this?
Well, that's a good question. We had folks that were just regular folks, citizens that lived in the Riverdale community and the Roseland community and nearby out here at Dolton
Yeah.
that had heard about the story of the Ton Farm, and so much is gone, so much is missing. In fact, the whole neighborhood is completely changed, and a lot of the buildings that existed at one time are no longer there. But this was a very vibrant community at one time, first settled by after Native Americans were displaced. I might mention that it was settled by Germans and followed by the Dutch. And the Dutch were very sympathetic to the cause of the freedom seekers because they had left their homes in Europe to come over here because of persecution back in the old country for mostly religious purposes and stuff like that. So this area, as I said, was a place where the folks would help out the freedom seekers as they were on their journeys. And that's a good point, though, Andrea, and I made a note of that because we should be talking to the Chicago Historical Society and the DuSable Museum. We're just beginning to work with the folks out there.
That's neat.
So the Chicago Historical Society has the resources and the grant money to perhaps funnel it into a more, aggressive search for artifacts or suggestions with their researchers there. And they have students from University of Illinois, interns from U of C and Northwestern and DePaul. Those students are always looking for a project for their thesis or whatever. And so if you could introduce this to the Chicago Historical Society, it could catch on like wildfire. You could have a student doing his thesis that would want to do it just on that area.
Right.
Wow. See that? She's a
Well,
Wonder Woman. That's a Wonder Woman right there. She will
So
help
maybe
you.
to finish on what you had asked me, Wanda, and we became interested in learning more about this project and finding out that we had hundreds and hundreds of people coming through this area. It just was astonishing that there's nothing written about it anywhere.
Right.
There's very little known about it. They don't teach it in schools.
No, they don't.
We learned a little bit about Harriet Tubman and about Frederick Douglass, but that's on the East Coast. But there was a very active and vibrant movement here in Illinois as well.
Well,
And that's what those students are thirsty to find.
Yes.
Reads those kids.
You know, can anybody hear me talking?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment. You know, I've known a number of Black professors who teach in the African American Studies department in some of these, you know, like DePaul and some other universities you have at Chicago State. I went to Northwestern, and I used to go to it, and still though that was not my major. And so I know from knowing people that a lot of these African American professors who do African studies and history oftentimes did research about the same subject. So as you know, it's helpful to get a student who may want to do that as their thesis. You know, your master. It's in all likelihood that you'd have a better chance at talking to one of the professors who is a historian in those areas, who would be a better contact source to gain information, is also who can refer you to others in that line of work. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And before we leave, I want to share my email address so folks like you could, if you have suggestions, you can write to me or give me a call, whichever. And these are good suggestions, and thank you very much for that.
Can you type your email into the chat, Tom?
For me?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you can type it in there. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's great. I mean, I really enjoyed this. This is just so enlightening. I had no idea about the Calumet River. I mean, I just didn't. People don't talk a lot about that, you know. But my grandmother came from Canada, from the Underground Railroad to Canada, and then she came here to Chicago.
Really? So you never told me.
That's as much as I know about her travel.
Well, I'm in the deep south right now, and I tell you, I'm in the deep south now. This land that I'm standing on, my father's in the distance. All the time, we got like about 100 acres. You know,
100 acres. We need to just go revive the world with that.
That's land.
So neat.
All this land
so neat.
All this land that you see, my father's father, he probably was the largest Black landowner in this town. Believe it or not, in the 50s, my grandfather, he had cotton plants, and whites would work for him, pick on his land to make money. He was very well off. I, of course, never saw him. But my father grew up, by, standards of the time, upper middle class Black person.
So, questions? Any other statements?
Tom is sitting on a gold mine of mystery that people don't know about.
Exactly, he is. How long you been doing this, Tom?
Well, this whole effort began around the year 1999 or 2000, right around in there. and some of the original folks that started our organization kind of dropped off over the years. But in 2017, we revived the effort, and 2019 we became a 501c3. And for the past 6 years, we've had enjoyed a relationship with the Cook County Forest Preserve, who sponsors some of our tours for us, and
That'll
they
work. Yeah.
provide buses, and we're putting together a county-wide plan because there's a number of other sites throughout the county that were also used as safe houses and other points of interest where abolitionists might have assisted the freedom seekers as they were coming along.
Whatever happened to the Ton family? I mean, did they continued that process until they left? I mean,
Well,
tell us more. What
I'll,
happened?
I'll tell you more. They settled in the town of South Holland and Roseland, and up until a few years ago, they used to have an annual reunion of the Ton family. They've had up to 800 people come to this area
Whoa.
for a reunion. We were just at a reunion 2 weeks ago for Juneteenth with the
Man.
Ton and Einenberg family from Holland.
Wow.
That
Oh my
they
goodness. Did
they
you
had a
all take
reunion.
pictures and did you record anything? Can we
Yeah, oh
see it
yeah.
through your eyes?
Yeah, and it was enjoyable, and
I
so many of
bet.
them have joined in our efforts, and we even had a group come over from Enigenberg in Holland. Let's see, it was the year before the COVID hit us. They came over with a group of about 20 people, and we gave them the grand tour of Roseland, the Ton
Wow.
Farm, South Holland, and they came out. They saw some of the relatives' names on cemetery graves and everything. It was
Ah,
quite an occasion.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet
Yeah.
that was.
So we have a number of Ton family members as members of our organization too. There's
Oh,
a
okay.
fellow on the west side. He's a Ton, and someone from Indianapolis, and a young lady from Indiana. Uh,
Oh,
so so they have joined in with us.
Yeah,
okay. Well, that is wonderful.
question. I
Mhm.
forgot the gentleman's name who is talking today.
Yeah, my name
Oh,
is Tom Shepard. I should have put that in the chat, which
Okay.
I can still do that for you.
I'm using this this thing here, and I'm not really familiar with the chat. But
Oh,
anyway, something I wanted to ask: um, do you do you know anything about the evolution of the demographic in that area as it relates to uh, blacks moving in an area and its present you know population? Because I know there's a number of blacks who live in that area today, and because of the freedom fighting efforts of the Hollandish Tongue family, uh, would that have kind of started a black community that has evolved up to today?
well, there's a couple things that I'll mention. Number one is that we have maintained. In fact, I'm going to mention my colleague who I wish he was on the line, but he happens to be vacationing in Hawaii right now.
oh
Pro-
man.
Professor Larry McClellan, who has been researching things for about 40 years now. He was one of the gentlemen, one of the people that founded Governor State University, which is out south
Oh,
of the city
Oh,
here, and he has been to a number of sites around the country as well as Canada, and has met many of the descendants, and a couple of them have authored books about their experiences that have been handed down. So we have talked to and met some of the people who are descendants that are either up in Michigan or in Canada, but there are so many people that don't even know their own
oh, that's
history,
right.
and
That's right.
we try to encourage genealogy and people to research and join with us, or just do it on their own and learn more about their own backgrounds and their family and where they came from, because not so much it wasn't recorded. And you probably know, I don't have to tell you that if you were enslaved, your owners didn't want you to know how to write, read,
exactly.
And communicate with other people and tell stories. Some of this stuff got handed down, but then when you up and leave, and move to another part of the country, oftentimes these stories either get lost.
Yeah.
They're not written down anywhere, and it takes a whole lot of research. One of the things Dr. McClown has done, he's written a number of books on from his research, and found individuals that he was able to dig in and talk to descendants and whatnot, and put together stories from that era. But it's not easy. It is not easy. And with that gentleman talking about professors that he might know that have either studied or researched these things, if they would contact us, we'd be very grateful. They can help us to fill in some of the gaps.
Right too, and also, like that. My background, I'm a chemist by profession, and I changed the careers to become a software engineer. I work for the federal government. I went to North Carolina graduate school in pursuit of a PhD, and I took some courses in data analytics. And it may well be possible that we can use, the new high technology and trying to, ferret out those nuggets of truth and seeing what some of the data that you have amassed and have collected over years, laying it all out. And you'd be surprised at sort of patterns and trends that you may discover, when you do that type of, that type of search.
I'd like to have you here right now, because I've been trying to get this email sent out for the whole afternoon, and Google keeps they keep kicking it back.
I love you, Tom. He said you've been trying to send it out all afternoon.
Who incidentally was very much a freedom fighter and stand up for racial justice. Got Paul Robeson from being thrown in jail and stood up for a number of people. That
sure.
guy, yeah, history, sure, yeah, and anyway, yeah, I don't think any of his equations is going to solve this snail mail problem.
No.
Oh, wow. This has been so refreshing. Thank you for sharing so much. You really got my juices going, because now I really want to find out more. It's interesting, to find out just whatever you can about your past. What happened before my grandmother came here. Where did her family go, and how did she get to Canada? She passed away before I got to ask her that question.
That house has been there for 100 years.
Really? Wow. Right there? What we looking at?
Yeah. That's my father was born.
Years?
Huh?
Your father was born in that house?
Yeah, he was born in that house to the right of there. And his sister, mom lived, and grandma lived 100 years. My on Sunday, I went to the church. We had a local church. I forgot the name of it. My grandfather, he donated the land, and he, gave a lot of the money to develop that church, and they have a cemetery there. And he's a trustee with his name, chiseled in the side of the wall of the church.
Oh, wow. We're gonna have to interview you said that's your father, right?
My father's father, yeah.
We gonna have to get you and your father online and interview him.